I never expected that a single piece of paper could destroy everything I had built. But that night in July, as I reached into my purse for my acceptance speech, my entire world collapsed in just moments. The annual pharmaceutical sales gala was meant to be my crowning achievement. After months of calculated risks and secret meetings with Richard, the regional director, I was finally receiving the recognition I deserved. My sales numbers had skyrocketed, placing me at the top of the Northeast Division. The promotion to National Accounts Manager was practically guaranteed. And this year's Top Performer Award goes to Miranda Holloway. The ballroom of the Four Seasons Boston erupted in applause. I smoothed down my emerald gown and made my way to the stage, feeling Vincent's proud gaze following me. My husband of 11 years sat at our company table, handsome in his tailored suit, raising his champagne glass in my direction. If only he knew what I had done to earn this moment. Richard stood at the podium, his smile holding secrets only we shared. Hotel rooms in Providence, Chicago, New York. Whispered strategy sessions that had nothing to do with pharmaceutical sales. His hand lingered too long as he passed me the crystal trophy. "Miranda has shown extraordinary dedication this past year," he said, his eyes conveying much more than his words. "Her commitment to success is unmatched." I approached the microphone, heart racing with triumph. The room was filled with colleagues who had no idea of the shortcuts I had taken. I reached into my purse for my carefully prepared speech, but as I pulled out the folded paper, something else fluttered to the stage floor. The receipt was face up. Marriott Boston Harbor. Presidential suite. 2 guests. A date when I had told Vincent I was in Chicago. Richard's corporate card details clearly visible. A small gasp escaped from someone in the front row. In the silence that followed, I heard the gentle scrape of Vincent's chair as he stood up. The look on his face sent ice through my veins. Not shock, not even anger. Just a calm, calculated recognition. The expression he wore when confirming a suspicion he had long harbored. "Miranda?" The microphone amplified the tremor in my voice as I bent to retrieve the paper, but Vincent was already moving. 3 long strides brought him to the stage. His forensic accountant's mind had always noticed patterns, inconsistencies, numbers that didn't add up. And now, in front of 200 of my colleagues, I watched him make the final calculation. "May I?" Vincent said, his voice controlled as he reached down and picked up the receipt before I could grab it. Richard stepped forward. "Perhaps we should continue with the ceremony." "Actually," Vincent interrupted, his eyes never leaving the paper, "I think we're all about to learn exactly what kind of performance we're celebrating tonight." The room went silent. The crystal trophy felt suddenly heavy in my hands. My secret had seemed so well protected, so carefully managed. But as Vincent held that damning receipt, I realized that some evidence cannot be concealed. And some explosions, once triggered, can never be contained. People often asked how Vincent and I made our marriage work, with my constant traveling and his long hours analyzing financial crimes for his firm. "Communication and trust," I always answered with a practiced smile. The irony wasn't lost on me, especially as I became increasingly skilled at fabricating my whereabouts. Our life in the Boston suburbs had all the markings of success: the renovated colonial home, Ethan's private school tuition, summer vacations on Cape Cod. Vincent's methodical approach to life had given us stability, but it was my pharmaceutical sales career that provided the excitement and financial boost we enjoyed. At least that's what I told myself when the guilt surfaced. I met Richard Keller at a regional sales conference in January. When he suggested we discuss my potential over dinner, I recognized the opportunity immediately. By February, our strategy sessions had evolved into something more intimate. By March, I had created an elaborate system to cover my tracks. "Vincent, I need to fly to Chicago for the new diabetes medication launch," I told him one Thursday evening as he helped Ethan with math homework at our kitchen island. "The regional office wants all the top reps there for specialized training." "Again?" "That's the 3rd Chicago trip this quarter," Vincent remarked, not looking up from Ethan's multiplication problems. "Didn't you just have training last month?" I had prepared for this. "Different product line. This one's going to be huge. They're fast-tracking everything." I placed a printout of a falsified itinerary on the counter. "I'll be back Sunday night." Vincent nodded, trusting me completely. That was the thing about having a spouse who valued precision and honesty. They expected the same from you. His faith in me should have been touching. Instead, it made things easier. What Vincent didn't know was that while I did board a plane that Friday, it wasn't bound for Chicago. Richard and I spent the weekend at a beachfront hotel in Rhode Island, discussing my promotion between moments of passion. I had become expert at managing my digital footprint: separate work phone, carefully crafted emails sent on timers, location services disabled. If you want to stay updated on more stories like mine and never miss a new release, simply subscribe now by hitting the notification bell. You'll be the first to know when similar tales of secrets and consequences are shared. My system seemed foolproof. I maintained 2 separate lives: dedicated mother and wife at home, ambitious pharmaceutical rep willing to do whatever it took for advancement at work. I justified each deception as necessary for our family's financial future. Vincent's forensic accounting work paid well, but my sales commissions were what afforded us our comfortable lifestyle. If sleeping with Richard meant doubling those commissions through preferred territory assignments and insider information on upcoming products, wasn't that ultimately benefiting my family? The pattern established itself with disturbing ease. Business trips extended by a day. Conference calls that required privacy in hotel rooms. Strategy sessions that ran late into the evening. Each lie building upon the previous one, creating an alternate reality that became increasingly difficult to track. "You seem different lately," Vincent observed one evening in late March as we prepared for bed. "More energized." I tensed momentarily before crafting my response. "The new sales approach is really working. I'm finally getting recognition from the regional office." That much was true, just not for the reasons he assumed. Vincent smiled, proud of me. "Your hard work is paying off. I've always admired your dedication." His admiration felt like a knife twist. Yet somehow, I compartmentalized, separating the Miranda who betrayed her husband from the Miranda who was ascending the corporate ladder. The guilt never quite disappeared, but it diminished with each successfully executed deception. By April, I had established a rhythm. 3 days at home being the perfect wife and mother, 2 days on the road being Richard's lover and protege. My sales numbers soared as he directed the most promising accounts my way. My colleagues noticed, of course, but attributed my success to my charismatic sales approach rather than my strategic relationship with the regional director. What I never accounted for was Vincent's professional instinct for detecting inconsistencies. The same analytical mind that uncovered financial fraud for a living was bound to notice the discrepancies in my stories eventually. But I was too intoxicated by success to see the danger. By May, I had convinced myself that I was untouchable. My affair with Richard had continued for nearly 4 months without raising suspicions, and my professional trajectory had never been stronger. The quarterly sales reports placed me 15% above my nearest competitor, positioning me perfectly for the national accounts manager role that would be announced at the July gala. "You're a natural at this," Richard told me one evening as we lay in a hotel bed in Providence. "The way you manage everything so seamlessly, it's impressive." I smiled, basking in his praise. "It's all about attention to detail. Never leave evidence, never break pattern without explanation." He traced circles on my shoulder. "Vincent has no idea?" "None," I said confidently. "He trusts me completely. And why wouldn't he? My stories always check out." That was my greatest strength, consistency in my fabrications. When I claimed to be in Chicago, I researched local restaurants and events so I could mention specific details. I bought appropriate souvenirs for Ethan. I even took photos in similar hotel rooms to share with Vincent when he asked how my trip was going. My pharmaceutical background had trained me well in presenting information convincingly. The same techniques I used to persuade doctors to prescribe our medications worked perfectly for convincing my husband of my fidelity. I maintained eye contact. I offered information without being asked. I predicted questions and prepared answers in advance. One particular evening in early June stands out in my memory as the height of my illusory mastery. Vincent and I were having dinner on our back deck, enjoying the early summer evening after Ethan had gone to bed. "So, the Chicago office seems to really value you," Vincent remarked, pouring more wine into my glass. "That's the 5th trip this quarter." I didn't hesitate. "They're grooming me for something bigger. Between us, I think the national accounts position is mine if the numbers stay strong through June." Vincent raised his glass. "To my brilliant wife, I knew you'd outshine everyone." "It means more travel the next few weeks," I added carefully. "But after the announcement in July, things should stabilize." "Whatever you need to do," he said supportively. "We'll manage here. Ethan and I have our routine down." I felt a momentary pang watching him sip his wine, completely unaware that Chicago had become code for my rendezvous with Richard. But I quickly suppressed it. My ability to maintain this double life felt like a skill I had mastered, a testament to my intelligence and adaptability. What I failed to recognize was that Vincent's apparent acceptance masked his growing awareness. A forensic accountant doesn't immediately confront discrepancies. They gather evidence, establish patterns, and build a comprehensive case before making accusations. The illusion of my security was reinforced by small victories, like when I claimed to attend a dinner with the Chicago team, and then accurately described a restaurant there because I had researched their menu online. Or when I mentioned a flight delay that actually appeared on the airline's status board, though I was never on that plane. Each successful deception bolstered my confidence. By late June, with the gala approaching, I had created an almost perfect parallel reality. My presentations at work referenced insights supposedly gained from Chicago meetings. My conversations at home included carefully constructed anecdotes about colleagues I'd supposedly spent time with. I maintained separate sets of photos, emails, and even receipts to support whichever version of events I needed to present. The night before the pharmaceutical gala, Vincent helped me pack my overnight bag for the Boston hotel where the event would be held. "Need help with anything else?" he asked, watching me organize my makeup case. "No, I've got it all under control," I replied, unaware of how dramatically those words would be proven wrong just 24 hours later. I didn't notice how he paused at my travel organizer, or the way his eyes lingered on my secondary phone when a message notification briefly illuminated the screen. I was too consumed with anticipation of the award I was certain to receive, the promotion that would follow, and the successful culmination of months of careful deception. Had I been more observant, I might have caught the subtle shift in Vincent's demeanor, the slightly too long moments of silence, the careful cataloging of my movements. But my sense of security had blinded me to the warning signs that my carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. Looking back, I can pinpoint exactly when Vincent began connecting the dots, though I was oblivious at the time. It was a Tuesday evening in early April, when he casually mentioned that he had called my hotel in Chicago to leave a message about Ethan's baseball game, only to be told they had no guest registered under my name. "Strange," I said, maintaining my composure while panic flared inside me. "I was registered under the company account. Corporate booking sometimes does that." Vincent nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense," though the receptionist seemed quite certain. I changed the subject quickly, but that night I lay awake, realizing I needed to be more careful. The next morning, I called Richard to ensure all future hotel bookings included contingency plans. We began using the pharmaceutical company's corporate portal for reservations, making them harder to trace. What I didn't realize was that Vincent had already begun his investigation. His experience tracking financial discrepancies professionally had made him sensitive to patterns of inconsistency, and something about my explanation hadn't satisfied him. By mid-May, Vincent had quietly started documenting my trips. I discovered this later, finding a small notebook in his desk drawer with dates, locations, and question marks. On days I claimed to be in Chicago, He had made notes of phone calls where background noises didn't match my purported location. No airport announcements when I claimed to be at O'Hare. The sound of ocean waves when I said I was downtown. His methods became increasingly sophisticated. One evening in June, when I returned from what I had called a 3-day intensive training in Chicago, actually a coastal weekend with Richard in Newport, Vincent embraced me warmly. "How was the deep dish pizza this time?" he asked casually. "Amazing as always," I replied automatically. "We went to Lou Malnati's on the second night." He smiled and took my suitcase. "Good to have you home." Only later did I realize my mistake. There had been an unexpected fire at Lou Malnati's that week, making dining there impossible. Vincent had laid a trap, and I had walked right into it. The escalation continued when Vincent began checking our joint credit card statements more carefully. I had been using cash and Richard's corporate card for our rendezvous, but occasionally small charges appeared. A coffee shop in Providence when I was supposedly in Illinois, a toll charge on a highway I shouldn't have been traveling. "The accounting doesn't add up," Vincent remarked one evening as he reviewed our monthly expenses. The phrase chilled me. It was what he said when investigating financial fraud at work. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just some irregular patterns in the credit card statements. Probably nothing." But the way he studied me suggested it wasn't nothing at all. By early July, just weeks before the gala, Vincent had begun taking half-days at work without explanation. I discovered later that he had used this time to visit my office on days I claimed to be there but wasn't. He spoke with my assistant under the pretense of planning a surprise for me, gathering information about my actual whereabouts. The evidence accumulated: discrepancies in mileage on my car, inconsistencies in my stories, hotel charges that didn't align with my supposed itinerary. Vincent, trained to spot financial irregularities, was methodically building a case against me, though I remained blissfully unaware. One evening, just days before the gala, Vincent asked to use my laptop when his was updating. I agreed without thinking, having cleared my browser history. What I hadn't considered was that Vincent knew how to recover deleted files. Later, I found my laptop open to my Google location history, which I had forgotten to disable during a weekend with Richard. "Your laptop was acting strange," Vincent said, when I questioned why it was open. "I ran a diagnostic." His voice was even, but something in his expression should have warned me. The walls were closing in, though I couldn't yet feel them. The final piece fell into place the morning of the gala. I was rushing to prepare, laying out my emerald gown and packing an overnight bag for our stay at the Four Seasons after the event. Vincent offered to help me organize my presentation materials. "You seem nervous," he observed, handing me my portfolio. "Just the usual pre-speech jitters," I replied. "This award means everything for my promotion." "Yes," he said quietly. "You've certainly worked hard for it." I didn't catch the double meaning in his words, nor did I notice him glancing at my purse where I had carelessly stashed a receipt from my last meeting with Richard. The very receipt that would fall to the stage floor just hours later. As we drove to the hotel that evening, Vincent was unusually quiet. I attributed it to the formality of the event, not realizing he was mentally preparing for a confrontation he had been orchestrating for months. By the time we arrived at the gala, he had all the evidence he needed. The only missing element was the public stage on which to present his findings. That stage was about to be provided, quite literally, as I approached the podium to accept my award, unaware that everything was about to unravel. The ballroom of the Four Seasons fell into a hushed silence as Vincent examined the hotel receipt in his hands. 200 pharmaceutical professionals, my colleagues, competitors, and superiors, watched the scene unfold with collective breath held. "Vincent," I whispered urgently, aware of the microphone still capturing every sound. "Please, not here." He looked up from the paper, his expression unnervingly calm. "Where would be more appropriate, Miranda? Perhaps the Marriott Presidential Suite? Or should we discuss this in Providence, Newport, all those places you visited when you were supposedly in Chicago?" Richard stepped forward, placing a hand on Vincent's shoulder. "Sir, I think we should take this conversation somewhere private." Vincent turned slowly to face him, and I saw something dangerous flash in my husband's eyes. "Richard Keller, Regional Director. Corporate card ending in 4789. He held up the receipt. "I believe you're already quite familiar with my wife's sales techniques." Murmurs rippled through the audience. I saw my direct supervisor's eyebrows rise, connecting dots that had likely been suspicious to her for months. Colleagues exchanged glances, recontextualizing my meteoric rise in sales performance. "Vincent, you're embarrassing yourself," I tried, reaching for the receipt. "This isn't what it looks like." "Isn't it?" He stepped back, addressing the room now. "For those who don't know me, I'm Vincent Holloway. I analyze financial discrepancies and patterns of deception for a living. And for the past 5 months, I've been building a case on my own wife." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a folded paper. My heart sank as I recognized one of the spreadsheets he used for his forensic work. "Miranda claims she was in Chicago on these dates." He pointed to a column of highlighted dates. "Yet her location data shows her in Providence. Hotel charges under Richard's corporate account confirm they shared accommodations on 17 separate occasions." The crystal trophy felt leaden in my hands. The stage light suddenly seemed too bright, too exposing. "Vincent, please," I pleaded. "Think about Ethan." His expression hardened. "I have thought about nothing else. While you were advancing your career through your extracurricular activities, I was the one attending his baseball games alone, explaining why Mommy had another emergency meeting in Chicago." The word Chicago hung in the air, transformed now into an indictment. I scanned the room desperately, looking for sympathy, but found only shock and secondhand embarrassment. Some colleagues couldn't meet my eyes. Others couldn't look away from the train wreck unfolding before them. If you're witnessing someone lying to your face right now, or feeling the sting of betrayal in your own life, hit that like button. Sometimes public recognition of these injustices is the only validation we get. "I don't think this is appropriate for the awards ceremony," the company's vice president said, approaching the stage. "Perhaps we should continue with the program and allow the Holloways to address their personal matters privately." Vincent turned to her with surprising composure. "With respect, this isn't just a personal matter. Miranda's sales performance, the very achievement you're celebrating tonight, was gained through unethical means. I believe that's relevant to everyone in this room." A heavy silence followed. The truth of his words was undeniable. My relationship with Richard had secured me preferential treatment, better territories, advance notice on product launches, advantages my competitors never had. "That's absurd," Richard finally said. "Miranda earned her position through exceptional performance." Vincent's laugh was hollow. "Exceptional performance indeed. Tell me, did everyone competing for top sales rep have the same access to the regional director?" Heads turned to a female colleague in the front row, Diane Matthews, who had consistently placed second to me in sales rankings. Her expression confirmed what everyone was thinking. The playing field had never been level. "I have records of territory reassignments," Vincent continued, producing another document. "Particularly lucrative accounts mysteriously transferred to Miranda's portfolio. Coincidentally, these transfers occurred immediately following weekends when her location data places her with Richard in luxury hotels." Richard's face had gone pale. "You tracked your wife's location. That's invasive." "No more invasive than you inserting yourself into my marriage," Vincent replied evenly. "And for clarification, I never needed to track her. Miranda's own Google account did that automatically. She just forgot to disable it." I felt physically ill, watching 8 months of deception laid bare in the most public, humiliating way possible. My carefully constructed narrative was being dismantled piece by the very person who knew me best. The credit card statements were particularly illuminating. Vincent continued, his forensic accountant's precision on full display. Miranda was careful to use cash or Richard's corporate card, but there were slip-ups. A parking garage in Providence when she claimed to be in Chicago. a coffee shop receipt time-stamped during what was supposedly an important sales meeting. I found my voice, desperation making it shrill. These are baseless accusations. Vincent is clearly jealous of my success and... Jealous? Vincent cut me off, his voice finally betraying emotion. I supported your career at every turn. I rearranged my schedule to accommodate your travels. I was proud of you, Miranda. The past tense hung in the air between us. What I couldn't support was being lied to while you slept your way to a promotion. The bluntness of his words caused audible gasps. The company vice president made another attempt to regain control of the situation. I think we should adjourn for a brief recess, she announced. Please enjoy the refreshments in the foyer while we sort this matter out. But Vincent wasn't finished. Before everyone disperses, there's one more piece of evidence I'd like to share. He produced his phone and held it up. Voice messages left by Richard on Miranda's secondary phone. I think the content speaks for itself. He pressed play, and Richard's voice filled the ballroom. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Remember to use the story about the Chicago focus group. Same suite as last time. The recording continued with details too intimate to be mistaken for professional communication. I watched as Richard's career imploded alongside mine in real time, as several company board members exchanged concerned glances. My legs nearly gave out as I finally comprehended the thoroughness of Vincent's investigation and the completeness of my exposure. Everything I had worked for, legitimately or otherwise, was crumbling before my eyes. The promotion, my professional reputation, my marriage, all destroyed in a matter of minutes. As attendees began awkwardly filing toward the foyer, I stood frozen on stage, still clutching my now meaningless trophy. Vincent approached me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. I gave you countless opportunities to tell the truth. His eyes, once filled with love and trust, now regarded me as he would any other subject of his investigations. But you chose to escalate the lies every time. Now we both have to live with the consequences. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone on stage with the physical evidence of my betrayal still scattered around me. Hotel receipts, location data, credit card statements, as damning as any crime scene. As the gala dissolved into chaos, I was ushered into a small conference room adjacent to the ballroom. The company's HR director and legal counsel joined me, their expressions grave. Richard was directed to a separate room, where I imagined a similar conversation was taking place. Miranda, these are serious allegations, the legal counsel began. If what your husband presented is accurate, we're looking at potential violations of company policy regarding conflicts of interest. I switched instantly to damage control mode. It's not what it looks like. Vincent has completely misrepresented the situation. The evidence seems fairly substantial, the HR director replied carefully. Evidence can be manipulated, I countered, falling back on my skills as a pharmaceutical representative. When doctors questioned the efficacy of our medications, I had always been able to reframe the conversation. This was no different, just another skeptical audience needing persuasion. Vincent works with financial data all day, I continued. He can make numbers tell whatever story he wants. This is about his insecurity, not my professional conduct. The HR director made notes while the legal counsel maintained a poker face. I couldn't tell if they were buying my explanation. Those hotel stays were legitimate business meetings, I insisted. Yes, some occurred in Providence rather than Chicago, but that was due to last-minute scheduling changes. Richard and I were working on the strategic rollout for the new diabetes medication. The company has benefited enormously from our collaboration. And the voice messages? The legal counsel asked. I faltered momentarily before recovering. Taken out of context. Richard and I developed a close professional relationship. Sometimes our communications were casual, but there was nothing inappropriate happening. Even as I spoke, I knew my defense was thin. Vincent had been too thorough, the evidence too damning. But admitting defeat wasn't in my nature, not after fighting so hard to reach the top. When I was finally allowed to leave the conference room, I found the gala in disarray. Small clusters of colleagues whispered as I passed. The award ceremony had been suspended indefinitely. Vincent was nowhere to be seen. I spotted Diane Matthews, my closest sales competitor, speaking with several executives. Their conversation halted abruptly when they noticed me approaching. "Diane," I began. "I know how this looks, but—" "Save it, Miranda," she interrupted, eyes cold. "I lost the Westlake Medical account to you in April. Now I understand why. My numbers were better. My relationship with their purchasing manager was stronger, but somehow you got the assignment. That was based on my previous performance," I argued. One of the executives, the national sales director, shook his head. "We're reviewing all territory assignments made by Richard in the past 6 months. If there were improprieties, they'll be addressed." I realized with sinking clarity that my professional reputation was beyond salvage. "Still," I persisted, "this is a personal vendetta by my husband. He's manipulating company politics to punish me for working long hours." The lie felt hollow, even to my own ears. The sales director's expression remained skeptical. "The voice recording seemed fairly explicit, Miranda." I changed tactics. "Richard pursued me. If anyone should be held accountable, it's him. He's in a position of power and took advantage." This approach gained some traction. I saw uncertainty flicker across the executives' faces. Gender dynamics in corporate settings were sensitive territory. Perhaps I could position myself as the victim rather than the perpetrator. I spent the next hour moving through the remaining gala attendees, offering alternative narratives. Vincent was jealous. Richard was predatory. The evidence was circumstantial. I was being held to different standards because I was a woman. Some colleagues seemed willing to reserve judgment. Others clearly had already decided. My assistant avoided eye contact entirely, making me wonder what information she had provided to Vincent during his investigation. Just as I began to think I might salvage something from the disaster, Vincent reappeared. He had been speaking with the company's CEO in a corner of the ballroom, and their conversation appeared intense. When they finished, the CEO looked in my direction with unmistakable disapproval. Vincent approached me, a manila envelope in his hand. "I thought you might try to spin this," he said quietly. So I brought backup. He handed me the envelope. Inside were printouts of text messages between Richard and me, discussing explicitly how to leverage our relationship for my professional advancement, detailed plans for territory reassignments, strategies for undermining Diane's relationships with key accounts, evidence not just of infidelity, but of calculated corporate manipulation. "How did you get these?" I whispered, genuinely shocked. "You use the same password for your secondary phone that you use for everything else. Ethan's birthday. Not very original for someone so careful." His voice held no satisfaction, just exhaustion. "I didn't share these with everyone because some details are simply too humiliating. But if you continue denying the truth, I will." The final thread of my defense strategy unraveled. Vincent had been 3 steps ahead of me the entire time. "What do you want?" I asked, finally abandoning pretense. I wanted honesty. I wanted respect. I wanted the marriage I thought we had. He sighed. "Now all I want is for you to stop lying. To me, to yourself, to everyone in this room. And if I do, then at least Ethan might grow up understanding that people can make terrible mistakes and still eventually tell the truth." The mention of our son pierced through my defensive armor. For the first time that evening, I felt the full weight of what I had done, not just to Vincent, but to our family. Yet even then, I made one final attempt. "Vincent, we can work through this. Couples therapy, a fresh start somewhere else. We have 11 years together. A son who needs both his parents." "No," Vincent said firmly. "What Ethan needs is to understand that actions have consequences. That integrity matters. I won't teach him that betrayal this calculated can simply be forgiven with an apology." As he walked away, I realized my defense had failed completely. No amount of pharmaceutical sales persuasion techniques could reframe what I had done or undo the evidence Vincent had meticulously compiled. My attempts to rewrite the narrative had only reinforced his certainty that our marriage was beyond saving. The final blow came as the gala disintegrated into an early end. The remaining attendees were gathering their belongings, the evening's celebration thoroughly ruined by the public spectacle of my exposure. I stood alone near the dessert table, abandoned by colleagues who just hours earlier had been congratulating me on my success. Vincent approached, carrying his laptop. His face showed no anger now, just resolute determination. Whatever he was about to do, he had thought it through completely. "There's something you should see," he said, setting the computer on the table. "This is what made it impossible for me to believe any of your explanations." He opened a spreadsheet unlike the others he had shown earlier. This one was more complex, with color-coded sections and multiple tabs. I recognized it as the format he used for his most complicated financial fraud cases. "I call this the pattern analysis," Vincent explained, his voice detached and professional. "As a forensic accountant, I look for consistencies that reveal intentional behavior rather than coincidental anomalies." He clicked through several tabs: hotel stays, location data, credit card discrepancies, phone records, account transfers. Each one meticulously documented, cross-referenced, and annotated. At first, I noticed small inconsistencies, the kind that could be explained away. A receipt that didn't match your story. A phone call with background noise that couldn't have been from where you claimed to be. He scrolled through the data. But when I applied statistical analysis to the patterns, something remarkable emerged. He clicked on a tab labeled Probability Analysis. The chance that all these discrepancies were innocent mistakes? Less than 0.001%. He looked at me directly. In court, this would be considered beyond reasonable doubt. As I stared at the screen, the enormity of his investigation became clear. This wasn't the angry reaction of a jealous husband. This was the methodical work of a professional who had applied his considerable skills to uncovering the truth. "When did you start this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "March 27th, he replied, without hesitation. "The day you claimed to be at a dinner in Chicago with the marketing team, but your credit card was used at a gas station in Rhode Island. That was barely 6 weeks into my affair with Richard." Vincent had been building this case for months, silently gathering evidence while maintaining the facade of our normal life. The realization made me feel physically ill. "Why didn't you confront me then?" Vincent closed the laptop. "Because I wanted to be absolutely certain. I wanted to give you every opportunity to end it yourself, to choose our marriage over whatever you thought you were gaining." The remaining gala attendees had grown quiet, watching our exchange from a distance. Even though they couldn't hear our words, the body language told the story. This was the final act in a drama that had begun hours earlier on the award stage. But most importantly, Vincent continued, I needed to protect Ethan. I wanted to understand exactly what was happening before deciding how to proceed. The mention of our son struck me like a physical blow. Where is he now? With my sister. He'll stay with her tonight while we sort things out. Vincent reached into his pocket and withdrew a final piece of paper. Unlike the other evidence, this one was formal, with legal letterhead. Separation agreement, he said, placing it on the table. My attorney drew it up last week. I had hoped not to need it. I stared at the document, reality finally crashing down around me. You're really doing this? Destroying our family over a mistake? No, Miranda, you destroyed our family. I'm simply acknowledging what's already happened. His calm certainty was more devastating than any anger could have been. There was no negotiation possible, no emotional appeal that could sway him. What would you have done? Vincent suddenly asked, addressing the small group of colleagues who remained nearby. If you discovered your spouse had been systematically lying to you for months, using your trust as cover while they betrayed everything you built together, what would be your response? The question hung in the air. No one answered aloud, but their expressions spoke volumes. Some looked away uncomfortably. Others met Vincent's gaze with understanding and sympathy. If you've been following this story and wonder what you would have done in Vincent's position, discovering months of calculated deception, leave a comment sharing how you would have handled this specific betrayal. Would you have gathered evidence like Vincent, confronted the affair immediately, or chosen a different path entirely? In that moment, watching my colleagues' reactions, I finally understood the full impact of what I had done. This wasn't just about an affair, or even about professional misconduct. It was about the systematic dismantling of trust, built on hundreds of individual lies, each one a conscious choice I had made. "I need you out of the house by tomorrow evening," Vincent said, his voice heavy but resolved. "My attorney will contact yours regarding arrangements for Ethan." He gathered his laptop and the spreadsheets, leaving only the separation agreement on the table between us. As he turned to leave, Richard approached, his face ashen. He had clearly received similar treatment from the company executives. "They've suspended me pending investigation," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I'll likely be terminated." Vincent paused, looking between us. There was no satisfaction in his expression, only weariness. "Consequences," he said simply, before walking away. Left standing with Richard amid the ruins of our careers and my marriage, I realized there was nothing left to defend. The evidence had spoken, more eloquently and definitively than any justification I could offer. 3 weeks after the pharmaceutical gala, I sat in my new apartment 15 miles from the home Vincent and I had shared. Boxes remained unpacked, their contents reminders of a life I no longer possessed. The separation agreement had been signed, divorce proceedings initiated. My employment with the pharmaceutical company had been terminated following an internal investigation that found ethical violations and conflicts of interest. That morning, I had my first supervised visit with Ethan. Vincent had been granted temporary full custody while the courts determined permanent arrangements. My son had asked questions I couldn't answer, his 8-year-old mind struggling to comprehend why his mother no longer lived at home. "Dad said you made choices that hurt our family," he'd said, his small face serious. "Is that true?" I had nodded, unable to lie anymore. "Yes. I made very bad choices." The honesty felt foreign after months of deception, but also somehow cleansing. Vincent had been right about one thing. Ethan deserved truth, even painful truth, rather than more carefully constructed narratives. My phone rang, my attorney calling with updates. The news wasn't good. Vincent's evidence had been reviewed by the judge, who found it compelling enough to influence the custody arrangement. I would have supervised visitation twice weekly, with the possibility of overnight stays after 6 months of family counseling. Richard had fared no better. The company had fired him officially the previous week, citing gross misconduct and abuse of position. Several female sales representatives had come forward after our exposure, describing similar propositions. What I had viewed as a unique relationship turned out to be a pattern Richard had established, with promising sales reps who could be manipulated with the promise of advancement. That afternoon, I drove past our former home, a pathetic attempt to glimpse something of my previous life. Vincent's car was in the driveway. Next to it sat Diane Matthews's sedan, my former sales competitor who had quickly been promoted to my vacated position. Through the living room window, I could see them at the dining table, papers spread between them. Ethan appeared briefly, carrying his baseball glove, and Diane ruffled his hair with casual affection. The scene struck me with physical pain. Vincent and Diane, both methodical, ethical professionals who valued honesty, seemed a natural pairing in retrospect. While I had no confirmation they were anything more than colleagues, the easy domesticity of the scene suggested a comfort level that Vincent and I had once shared. I drove away before they could notice me, understanding that my actions had created ripples extending far beyond my own downfall. The sales territories were being reorganized. Accounts I had stolen from Diane through my relationship with Richard were rightfully returned to her. The profession I had corrupted was correcting itself in my absence. 1 week later, Vincent requested a meeting at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our residences. He arrived precisely on time, as was his nature, carrying a folder of documents. "The house is being put on the market," he informed me without preamble. "You'll receive your portion of the equity after the sale, as stipulated in the agreement." I nodded, accepting this latest loss. "How is Ethan adjusting?" "As well as can be expected. The therapist says he's processing things in a healthy way." Vincent's expression softened slightly. "He misses you. That won't change, regardless of what happened between us." For a moment I glimpsed the man I had married. Compassionate despite his precision, kind despite his analytical nature. The man whose trust I had systematically destroyed. "I heard you've been spending time with Diane," I said, unable to keep the jealousy from my voice. Vincent regarded me steadily. "Diane has been helping reconstruct the accurate sales data from the past 6 months. The company asked for my forensic expertise given my familiarity with the case." "Is that all it is?" "You forfeited any right to that information," he replied, his tone even but firm. "But since it affects Ethan, I'll tell you that Diane and I have developed a friendship. She understands integrity in a way that you and Richard never did." The words stung precisely because they were true. My relationship with Richard had been built on mutual exploitation, his power for my advancement. Nothing sustainable could have grown from such toxic soil. "I have something for you," Vincent said, opening the folder. "This spreadsheet tracks all your decisions over the 8-month period from our first dating anniversary to the night of the gala." He slid it across the table. The document was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. Every lie, manipulation, and betrayal cataloged with clinical precision. Dates, times, locations, all cross-referenced against what I had claimed versus what had actually occurred. The stark visualization of my deception was overwhelming. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Because someday, Ethan might ask why his family fell apart. And when that day comes, I want you to have the facts rather than the story you've been telling yourself." Vincent gathered his things, preparing to leave. "The numbers don't lie, Miranda. They never did." As he stood, he delivered the final line that would forever mark the end of our marriage. "You sold our marriage for a promotion, and I've just calculated the exact price." The coffee shop continued its normal rhythm around us as Vincent walked away. Other customers chatted, ordered drinks, lived their uncomplicated lives. Meanwhile, I sat alone with the spreadsheet that documented every step of my downfall. Each cell and formula a reminder that some patterns, once established, lead inexorably to their mathematical conclusion. The receipt that had fallen from my purse that night, such a small piece of paper to collapse an entire life. But Vincent had shown me the truth. It was never about one piece of evidence. It was about a pattern of choices, each one taking me further from integrity and closer to the moment when everything would inevitably unravel. I closed the spreadsheet and left the coffee shop, stepping into a future I had created through my own actions. A future where trust, once broken by such calculated deception, could never be fully restored.